Imagine walking onto the tarmac, ready to board your own private jet, only to be stopped by the crew, your crew, who question if you even belong there. That's exactly what happened to a successful Black businesswoman whose dream day turned into a humiliating nightmare. She had worked hard for everything she owned, including the jet waiting for her, yet the crew's disbelief and dismissive attitude left her stunned and hurt. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. It was something deeper, something more troubling. The tension escalated, the woman's calm resolve met with growing resistance. But what happened next? How did she turn this moment of disrespect into a bold, life-changing decision that no one saw coming? This story isn't just about one incident. It's about self-respect, accountability, and standing up for what's right. Stay tuned for the powerful twist that changed everything. This wasn't just an isolated incident for her. As a Black woman in the corporate world, she had faced subtle forms of discrimination throughout her career. Yet nothing had prepared her for this, standing there, questioning her very right to be where she belonged. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the owner, the decision maker, the one who had paid for that jet with her own hard work. The crew's disbelief wasn't just about her identity. It was about the perception of authority and privilege. Were they unfamiliar with her status, or was there something deeper at play? Was this a reflection of the systemic biases she had fought so hard to overcome? The questions lingered, unanswered, fueling the simmering tension. As the confrontation unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just about her being denied boarding. It was about something much larger. A story of power, respect, and the relentless struggle for recognition that many Black women face. And the more she pushed for answers, the more it became apparent that this wasn't just about the jet. It was about who she was expected to be, and the price she was unwilling to pay any longer. As the confrontation escalated, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about one moment, but about a deeper issue of recognition and authority. The crew's reaction wasn't just about questioning her identity. It was about power, control, and the biases that seep into every aspect of society. For her, it wasn't just about the jet. It was about the silent doubts that had followed her throughout her life. How many times had she been overlooked, dismissed, or questioned because of the color of her skin? Meanwhile, the crew, unaware of the full scope of the situation, seemed almost unaware of the weight they carried in this interaction. Were they acting on ignorance, or was there something more insidious at play? Were they part of a system that had been built to reinforce exclusion rather than inclusion? These questions began to haunt her, forcing her to confront not just the incident itself, but the larger societal structures that allowed it to happen. In the background, whispers of entitlement and privilege seemed to echo louder with each passing second. She couldn't ignore the feeling that this was more than just one incident. It was a reflection of years of struggle and unseen battles. The tension was thick, but the answers still felt just out of reach. She stood there, her mind racing, as the crew's hesitation turned into doubt. The quiet murmurs of disbelief were impossible to ignore. Every glance exchanged between them seemed to carry a message. They didn't trust her. They didn't believe she had the right to be there. The longer the silence stretched, the more her patience wore thin. In that moment, she felt the weight of all the moments when she had been made to feel invisible, undervalued, dismissed. The microaggressions, the assumptions, the subtle messages that told her she didn't belong, were they all leading to this? Was this the culmination of a lifetime of being questioned, doubted, and erased? Her heart pounded as the tension built, each passing second stretching out like an eternity. The frustration simmered, and the resolve to stand her ground grew stronger. But in the background, a fear gnawed at her. What if this wasn't just an isolated incident? What if this was the reality she had to confront, the reality she could no longer ignore. She wasn't just fighting to board her jet, she was fighting for her dignity. Her right to exist in a world where she shouldn't have to prove her worth over and over again. The clock was ticking, and the tension grew unbearable. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, a new voice cut through the tension. It wasn't from the crew she had been arguing with, but from someone else entirely. A man, casually stepping forward, as if he had the authority to intervene. His presence felt unnervingly deliberate, his gaze fixed on her as though he were sizing her up. "Ma'am, there seems to have been a mix-up," he said, his tone calm, but laced with a quiet command. His words were polite, but there was something unsettling beneath the surface. It wasn't the crew's doubt anymore, it was his. His eyes betrayed a quiet judgment, as though he had already decided who she was, who she wasn't, without knowing a thing about her. The crowd of passengers had started to gather, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Some were watching, others whispering. The tension was building, thick and oppressive. She could feel it in the air. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about a system that had been designed to hold certain people back, to make them prove their worth again and again. Her fists clenched, and for the first time, she realized this wasn't just a battle for her dignity. It was a fight for something much bigger. But what could she do when even those who should have supported her were doubting her right to stand there? The air grew heavier as the man stepped closer, his presence impossible to ignore. She stood her ground, every ounce of her resolve pushing back against the doubt that lingered in the room. But deep down, she couldn't escape the fear that maybe, just maybe, they had already made up their minds. That just when she thought she had reached her breaking point, something unexpected happened. The man's demeanor shifted, his expression softened. He glanced at the crew, his voice calm but firm. "Let her through," he said, his tone carrying an authority she hadn't expected. A wave of silence followed. The crew hesitated, then exchanged uncertain glances before stepping aside. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined the whole thing. But as she climbed onto the jet, she realized it wasn't over yet. Just as the door was closing behind her, the man approached again, his gaze steady. "This isn't just about a jet, is it?" he asked quietly. "It's about something bigger. Something that's been overlooked for too long." His words hung in the air, leaving her with a sense of uncertainty and a glimmer of hope. In that final moment, she realized the fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As the jet soared through the skies, she sat in silence, the events of the day replaying in her mind. The encounter wasn't just about being questioned or doubted. It had become a symbol of something much larger. It was a reminder of the battles many Black women face every day, whether in the workplace, in public spaces, or even in their own achievements. That day had been a turning point, not just for her, but for those who witnessed it. The crew, the passengers, even the man who had stepped in. All of them had been forced to confront their own biases. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about making others see her as she truly was. Though the journey wasn't over, she knew that standing up for what was right had made a difference. The incident had sparked conversations, ignited awareness, and left behind a quiet sense of change. In the end, it wasn't about the jet. It was about self-worth, respect, and breaking the cycles that sought to diminish who she was. And as she looked out at the endless horizon, she knew that while the fight would continue, the journey ahead would be one of empowerment and resilience.